Hello, good evening. Welcome to the first installment of our new series.
Yes, we are so excited to be bringing a YouTube channel to everybody, which I never thought I was going to do, but here we are with a bunch of fancy stuff because our producer has like really cool stuff.
Our producer is awesome.
So what we are going to be doing, hopefully, for this YouTube channel is bringing some young traditional Catholic teen views on things. We're going to hopefully have some serious, informational videos if we don't get sidetracked. And we are going to also have some fun content, hopefully. So we are very excited.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Yes. So producer has decided to challenge our perceptions by providing us a list of topics to discuss. We're going to be given a time limit because, of course, as former debaters, we do tend to pontificate on and on and on. So we're going to be given a time limit, and we are going to then contrast our responses with those provided by artificial intelligence. We're going to see how intelligent that artifice is, and we're also going to see how we compare to it.
And so we're very excited to begin, which I've probably said like 5 times now. But let's get our first question.
Ladies first.
Yes. Okay. We have our first question. What are some common misconceptions about Catholicism? We get 5 minutes for this?
Oh, come on. There's 2,000 years worth of material to cover here, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest misconceptions are definitely about Mariology, though.
100%, yeah. Especially if you're dealing with more of like a fundamentalist or Protestant audience.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's a lot of people who will think, oh, well, we worship Mary. You know, we have very specific, different kinds of honor and then worship.
Exactly. There's a very clear distinction between Dulia, which is the type of veneration we offer to the saints, which is for what they've done in Christ. Then we have Hyperdulia, which is
for Mary.
Exactly, that's for Mary, so it's an elevated type of veneration. But then there's Latria, which according to Aquinas is the supreme mode of veneration due to the supreme being and first mover in the universe, who is Almighty.
We have, a lot of people think, oh, well, you have statues of them. That's just like the idols that would have been used for, idol worship. We have those statues as reminders of the holy lives they led and as ways that we can just remind ourselves in our lives of these saints that had just really beautiful, amazing stories and struggles. And we are ready. And that just really helps us to use in our own lives those examples. Those examples, and just because we have those statues doesn't mean we worship them.
What are some other common misconceptions?
So we saw sort of a false dichotomy be established between the cross of Christ and the figure of Christ himself upon the cross. And that has severely impacted much of both Eastern and Western thinking in the latter halves of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. And that is something that I think is very predominant, albeit at perhaps a more subconscious level, but it's certainly something that we need to address in order to have productive conversations in this regard. Especially in the latter half of the 20th century, to quote the great Fulton Sheen, we began to see a division between sort of the totalitarian world model and the libertarian world model, in the sense that we saw what was at that time communistic Russia and other communistic countries embrace sort of what he called the cross without Christ. So almost a form of asceticism, but without a supernatural telos, right? Without a supernatural goal, without the higher principles that animate the Christian call to self-denial. So it was self-denial, but it was for the sake of the state or for the sake of very naturalistic worldly ends. Similarly, we saw in much of Western culture an emphasis on Christ without the cross, right? So it's almost a feel-good, like a buddy conception of Jesus, something which is antithetical to most of historical Christianity, and something which is also very counter to what we see in the more totalitarian models, such as in Russia, such as in China, some of these other harsher climates.
People think that oh, well, I don't need to be Catholic. I could just have Jesus as my friend. And just have like this spiritual disposition. And that's just avoiding the duties and realities of Catholicism, what it really means.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think most of the people who hold to that view either don't understand what Catholicism is, or they simply think that what they have is sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you have all these rules and all these things you have to follow, and that's terrible. That's a terrible idea. And we don't do it just to have stiff rules.
Right. It's not like Pharisaical Judaism. It's not laws for the sake of following the letter of the law. It's following laws for the sake of saving our souls and the souls of those around us, right?
Absolutely.
Lex Suprema, the highest law in the church, is the salvation of souls.
That's time.
All right, well, 5 minutes goes by quickly, especially when you're...
Predictions for what the AI answer is going to be?
Oh man, I gotta imagine it's gonna say something about Mary, because whenever I think of misconceptions, the biggest one is worshiping Mary and the saints.
Especially if we're coming at it from sort of an American perspective. America tends to be very Protestant, so that's probably something the algorithm would pick up on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably something to do with the sex scandals as well. That's a big thing.
Yes.
in sort of secular conceptions of Catholicism. So maybe something about priestly celibacy.
Yeah,
and also look at the role of the synod as well. I mean, look at all the questions that are coming up there about women's ordination and revisiting marriage and the roles of the sexes and stuff. I imagine there's got to be some of that controversy in there as well. According to ChatGPT, oh, you're going to love this first one.
Oh man.
There are several common misconceptions about the Catholic Church that can arise from misunderstandings, historical contexts, or misinterpretations. Here are a few. Misconception number 1. Catholics worship Mary and the saints.
Yes.
Clarification. Catholics venerate Mary and the saints, which means they honor them and respect them as holy figures, but worship, we would call that latria, is reserved for God alone. Mary and the saints are seen as intercessors who pray for believers, but they do not replace God in Catholic theology. I gotta say, that's a pretty solid clarification there coming from that artificial intelligence. Real nice way to sum it up, way better than we did. And it's not overly technical either. It's good, it's accessible. Can't complain about that.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, second misconception. The Catholic Church opposes science and progress. That's one we didn't get to talk on.
Yeah,
at least directly. I mean,
that one.
you can kind of see it in the latter half of the 20th century with sort of a secular humanist approach. Even you can trace it back hundreds of years before then. But the clarification that ChatGPT gives is that while there have been historical instances of tension between the church and certain scientific theories, such as Galileo's,
they think Galileo just is the whole story of the Catholics' position with science, and that's so not true. I mean, some of the biggest and best, most well-known scientists were literally Catholic.
100%. I mean, the guy who first proposed Galileo's theory, which is heliocentrism, right? That the Earth goes around the sun. The first guy to really popularize it was actually a cardinal of the church, and he proposed it several decades before Galileo came. And one could certainly make the case there's a good deal of historical evidence to, back this theory. And this tends to be the commonly accepted traditional Catholic theory, is that Galileo's censure wasn't necessarily because of his scientific theory, it was because of his personal conduct, his disobedience to the church in other areas, and simply his lack of submission to what was at that time something that was seen as a predominant scientific view, not just the scientific religion, not just the religious view, but also the predominant scientific view.
Absolutely. And so like a story like that doesn't just give the entire story for the Catholic approach to science, and science and Catholicism really truly go hand in hand. And plus you cannot explain so many things in science without Catholicism.
Certainly, the empirical side. This is something Pope Benedict XVI pointed out in one of his addresses to the Pontifical Academies of the Sciences, is that this empiricism, the empirical sciences can go hand in hand with Catholic theology, provided that it's true empiricism. It's undertaken for the sake of truth, for the sake of getting to the heart of the matter. Misconception number 3, okay, this is from the ChatGPT list of misconceptions about the Catholic Church. And it is that Catholics believe they can buy their way into heaven with indulgences. Now,
Such a common one.
the clarification, and again, this is definitely something that was written with perhaps a bit more of the Protestant framework in mind, but the clarification that's given is that the practice of indulgences historically caused controversy during the Reformation, but today indulgences are understood as remissions of temporal punishment due to sin, not purchases of forgiveness or salvation. Salvation in Catholic teaching comes through God's grace, received through faith, and lived out in works of charity and obedience. So, first impression, that's pretty solid. I would take issue where it says today indulgences are understood as remissions
Because
of temporal punishment, because that's pretty much.
They're still like, oh, but
for sure.
buy indulgence or you buy your way.
Buy your way into heaven. Yeah, well, that's
at
part
least
of
we
the
do.
whole.
At least, or we don't just say a phrase. I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and then
Yeah.
think I'm home free.
Right. That's one problem with one saved, always saved theology. But also, it's part of those who feel compelled to defend Luther have to assert that this was the practice during the church, when there certainly were corruptions of the church's practice regarding indulgence, but the church never officially taught anything other than what it teaches today. There were certainly corrupt men in the church, but they're also largely being cleared out by various inquisitions at that point within the church. Well, the church was Ecclesia Semper Reformanda, as Ratzinger said in his 1985 Ratzinger report. The church is always in need of reform, but always reforming herself at the same time. So there was already, even the Dominicans, the Dominican order at that point, was undertaking several efforts to purge the church of these corrupt men who were doing evil things. But it was never, this practice of doing evil things was never endorsed by the church.
Yes.
With that being said, let's move on to misconception number 4. And this actually kind of ties in with another one of Luther's complaints from his 95 Theses. Misconception number 4, the Catholic Church is wealthy and greedy. I wonder what that sounds like. Clarification. While the church does possess valuable assets and properties, these resources are often used for charitable purposes, educational institutions, healthcare, maintaining cultural heritage. The church also supports numerous charitable works and relief efforts worldwide.
Which actually we ran hospitals, we ran schools.
We founded the hospitals.
We founded all of these really great things, and nowadays that's been taken from the churches, given to the state, and it's just disintegrated. I mean, our public school system is in just a really terrible state, and a lot of things that the church just really did a wonderful job with in all of our charitable ministries, and we don't have that anymore. So if anything, if you have any, complaint about, oh, well, the church is greedy, we were the biggest giver of charity, still are, and you took that from us. So
that's very true. There's no better historical example than the French Revolution. That's when the state came and took so much from the church, especially under Napoleon. But in regards to that actually sort of preceded the French Revolution. Allow me to clarify that historically. But France, traditionally called the eldest daughter of the church, is a prime example, because now the current ecclesial situation in France is that many of the churches receive direct state funding, and that directs their mission to such an extent that a lot of them
the state, not
exactly. Yeah. Well, they serve. Their just natural human tendency is to placate from whom the money comes, right?
Absolutely.
So, and this is also something we see in regards to the assets of the church. The church possesses very many valuable real estate assets, for example. But a lot of these are hard assets. They're not liquid. The liquid assets of the church, right, the donations of the faithful, have been decreasing almost, exponentially under the current pontificate because of the political madness that has been ensuing ever since 2010, well, really 2013, which was the election of Bergoglio. But with all that aside, you can also see with the traditional example of the Catholic Church being the one who cares for the poor, the downtrodden, those who are marginalized, to use a common catchphrase by society, you can see in that a more natural distribution, or not necessarily distribution, perhaps incentive structure would be the right word.
Yeah.
You see far more incentives to charity with the church running things than you do with the state, because the state can only take by coercion, whereas the church takes by free will, right?
Yeah.
The church doesn't coerce, the church takes what people will give to
the
it.
state, and the church shouldn't be serving the state or political motives.
Right.
Alright, we should probably do the next one before you.
Fifth misconception: priests cannot marry. Clarification: while Latin Rite Catholic priests are generally celibate, they do not marry after ordination. This is a discipline rather than a doctrine. Eastern Catholic churches in Kingdom of Rome have married priests. Additionally, married Anglican priests who convert to Catholicism can be ordained as Catholic priests. Pretty good clarification. Definitely love that they include the discipline versus doctrine difference. That's very important in understanding this. The traditional practice certainly is celibacy. That's what probably 80-90% of all priests throughout the history of the church have been. But there are also those pastoral provisions, as Pope Benedict XVI called them, that we could see within the Latin Rite, and of course the Eastern Rites have their own organically developed traditions in that regard.
Yep.
And then sixth misconception is that Catholics believe in salvation by works alone. And clarification is that Catholic teaching emphasizes that salvation is by God's grace alone, received through faith. Good works are seen as a response to God's grace and a means of growing in holiness, cooperating with God's will, and demonstrating faith. And this, of course, corresponds to New Testament passages, for example, from the Epistle of St. James, where it talks about faith without works being dead, and show me your faith. Show me your works, and I will show you your faith. And
show
there's
me
also
your faith without works, and I will show you.
Yes, something to that. I mean, we're Catholics because I don't have the exact
You don't have
verse
memorized.
citation. Sadly. Shame on me. But also, we can see from one of the Protestants' less favorite episodes in Catholic Church history, which would be the Council of Trent. We can see this confirmed by Trent as well. One of the anathemas in the Council of Trent, I believe in Session 7, says he is anathema who says that by works alone may he be saved. So, anathema is a very specific theological pronouncement. It says, let him be cursed, let him be damned, unless he repents from his heresy. So, the Church does not endorse this misconception that a lot of Protestants will level against it. But it does place a greater emphasis on works and salvation than a lot of more fundamentalist Protestants do tend to do. And so, for that reason, there is historically been a lot of misconceptions about it. And that's actually something that ChatGPT said. It says these misconceptions stem from a variety of sources, including historical events, cultural stereotypes, or misinformation. Understanding the clarifications can help foster more accurate discussions about Catholic beliefs and practices.
That just screams ChatGPT.
It does.
But
it's not wrong though.
No,
That's the thing. It's not that wrong.
And I was talking to my dad the other day, and the thing with AI is it'll generally be right, it'll generally have the facts, but sometimes it'll slip that little thing in there that's wrong. And I think that's one of the more dangerous things about AI is it can generally have decent understanding of the facts, but sometimes it's the little things that'll slip in there to mislead you that'll end up
100%. I mean, we know it has a very relativistic framework, right? It tends to place beliefs on an equal footing. It doesn't tend to have great value for the objectivity of truth. And furthermore, we can also see that in a number of cases, and this is perhaps more true with Google's AI. They call it used to be called Bard, it's Gemini now. This is one I'm very familiar with.
Gemini's a whole nother can of beans.
Oh, it absolutely is. Well, can of worms, can of snakes, I might say.
Something.
But can of a lot of things at this point.
The most annoying thing about that is if it deems it to be controversial, it won't tell you anything.
Yeah, I've had it actually generate responses and then delete them in front of me.
Yeah, same.
So I'll reload it and I'll screenshot it before it gets deleted because it usually is helpful.
Yeah, because it's so worried about getting in trouble for something. But,
I mean,
it will still tell you.
I tried to ask Chris about Chrysostom's view of husbands and wives.
Oh man.
It refused to answer my question.
Yeah, so.
And then actually, I asked for St. Paul's teaching, about how the husband is head of the family.
Oh, I bet it did not want that one.
It changed the words of Scripture, Ephesians 5:23, to say that wives should submit to their husbands, even as husbands submit to their wives, which is opposite of Holy Scripture and absolutely absurd. I mean,
yeah, that's crazy. So, AI gave decent responses.
In this case,
it can be very much dangerous.
So how would you rate its answer on a scale of 1 to 10?
It was close. It did a good job. I think it did. It definitely got some of the big, more obvious misconceptions. misconceptions.
Yeah, definitely cleared up a lot of things. I think if I was somebody who was trying to investigate the faith, I would. If I was given that answer, I think I'd be on a pretty good path to finding the truth.
And it's very concise, which is definitely helpful.
Definitely. Conciseness is not one of the things we're good at, but
It was good. It was good. I would just for a couple of those minor critiques, and just because I think there could have been a little bit more specificity or perhaps objectivity is what I would be looking for, and maybe a little bias. I'll throw that right out there. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10,
I think I would agree with that.
and I think it's overall pretty good. Could have done a little bit better, but considering
For
it was
AI?
written in like 10 seconds by algorithm, that's pretty doggone good.
Yeah, that's impressive. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the first question.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed our brief examination, not so brief, examination of ChatGPT's responses to, or I should say, categorization and response to misconceptions about the Catholic faith. If you're interested, check out more of our content. Thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We hope to have a lot more coming out, and we hope that this has been enlightening. So thank you very much for watching.
Have a blessed day.
You too. Yes. Shoot.